with the opposition, but these keys are very high standard keys. And key number 12, and it doesn't matter how we make the call on this, but every time I've spoken to an Indian audience, my call and your call on key 12 has been different. How many of you think the Democratic incumbent party candidate, Barack Obama, is charismatic? Yeah, see, how many think he's not? See, almost all of you who think something about Barack Obama think he is. I didn't give him the charisma key for 2012. Partly because I'm being conservative, but partly because I thought he's lost some of the magic. I definitely gave him the key in 2008. I thought he was amazingly charismatic the last time. But here's what I think happened. This is my own personal view. And as I said, our call on this key doesn't matter. But my own personal view, and I think this is something we can apply to any politics, the expectations were much too high for Barack Obama. People thought he'd come in and solve all our problems. Well, the truth is, as powerful as a president is, he can't come in, wave the magic wand, and solve all the problems. It doesn't work that way. You know, as I said before, America and India are huge multinational economies. The president can nudge the economy, he can move it, but he can't just fix the economy. Plus, he's got to deal with Congress, which is very difficult to deal with. He's got to control the bureaucracy, and he can't control what goes on in the world. So I think the reason why, for the American people, Obama has lost some of the charisma is that expectations were too high and too unrealistic. And his approval ratings aren't that strong. They're about even. So I call key number 12 false. But as you'll see, it doesn't matter. Challenger charisma. I don't know if any of you know anything about Mitt Romney, the Republican challenger, but I assure you, he is about as charismatic as a street in this city, 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Forget it. No charisma for Mitt Romney. And so key number 13 is true. Do we have any mathematicians in the audience? I don't think we need it. How many keys are false? 3 or 2 on your call. 3 on my call. That's why I said it doesn't matter. Key 1, key 6, and on my call, key 12. How many keys does it take to count out the party in power? 6. So whether it's 2 or 3, and let's be conservative and say 3, Barack Obama is far, far from the 6 negative keys necessary to count him out. And he can even withstand some setbacks and still be reelected president of the United States. Now, I'd love to tell you that you are the first people to hear about this. But again, to quote Richard Nixon, that would be wrong. I actually first came out with a prediction for 2012 in an article in the International Journal of Information Systems in January 2010. Almost 3 years before the election. Once again, it was pretty clear how things were going to be lined up. I figured the recession would be over by 2008. I didn't see a third party. I didn't see a charismatic Republican candidate. So even as early as 2010, the keys were beginning to line up in favor of Barack Obama. Can we go down? Down. Keep going, keep going. Go all the way to the bottom. One more. There we go. Now, you may think, all right, if Barack Obama believes me, and again, politicians never believe academics, they don't think we know anything. They think they know it all, or the arrogance and power. I'm sure that's not true in India. I'm sure all the politicians listen to all the academics. Certainly don't in the United States. You might think, all right, why bother campaigning? And, you know, it's all over. I think there's something to that. Just as I said, the $1 billion that the candidates spend, that the media spends, would be better off going to charity. The $2 billion. $2 billion. They're going to spend $2 billion, Romney and Obama. That they spend on the campaign would be better off going to charity. But the keys does have some lessons. Remember, it is governing, not campaigning, that counts. Effective government keeps incumbent parties in office and renders futile, useless, conventional campaigning by the challenger. So you're the challenger, Mitt Romney. What do you do? There is a lesson. The keys actually tell you what you should do. A candidate disadvantaged by the lineup of the keys has an incentive to break the pattern of history by waging an unconventional breakthrough campaign, by doing bold and innovative things. I don't think you're going to break the pattern of keys. I still think you're going to lose. But you know what? You can lose in different ways. I know it's hard. No candidate ever thinks that. But you can lose in different ways. You can lose irrelevantly by just being another conventional politician. You'll lose and everyone will forget about you. Or you can lose significantly by changing the political conversation, by changing the political argument. And some of our worst losing candidates, like a very conservative candidate, Barry Goldwater, in 1964, and a very liberal losing candidate, George McGovern, in 1972, changed the patterns of politics and inspired a lot of people, even though they lost. Will Mitt Romney do this? Absolutely not. Let me tell you why. I don't think this has affected Indian politics too much yet, but it's a warning because it's affected American politics. And that is, the candidates don't listen to the academics. You know who they listen to? The consultants, the ad men, the pollsters. These guys have an interest in conventional campaigns because they make tens of millions of dollars. If the candidates are spending $2 billion, the consultants are getting a few $100 million out of that. So they have an interest in the status quo. In fact, one of my good friends is a very prominent consultant. His name is Bob Schrum. And when I first developed the keys, I gave them to Bob Schrum. And I said, hey, take a look at this. This was 1981. Bob Schrum, the consultant, called me back 2 days later and said, Lichtman, I hate them. Find your crazy Russian friend, go back to your computers, redo them, and come up with something I can manipulate. Consultants can't manipulate it. They're not going to change the economy and foreign policy. It's also got some lessons for Obama, and I think he's more likely to listen. As I said, I talk to him, I know him. He's sort of an intellectual himself. Candidates favored by the keys, Barack Obama, the sitting president, have no incentive to break historical patterns, but they do have an incentive to build a foundation for governing over the next 4 years. We have something in America called a mandate, right? When you win, are you winning on an agenda? Are you coming into office kind of having told the American people and the Congress what your goals are for the next 4 years? As opposed to just, again, doing conventional campaigning. If you do that, you are much more likely to be able to succeed. For a sitting president, you are much more likely to be able to succeed if you build a foundation or a mandate for governing over the next 4 years. So the keys are not just a nice trick system here. They, in fact, have profound lessons for how presidential politics ought to be conducted in the United States. So, in conclusion, there is an old saying attributed to your uneasy neighbors, the Chinese. Some call it a blessing, some call it a curse. And the saying is, may you live in interesting times. I hope I've made these times and American presidential elections a little bit more interesting for everyone in this extraordinary audience. Thank you so much. I'll take all your questions. You can ask me about anything. Of course, you can ask me about Indian politics. I've been here 10 days, and I'm an expert in every aspect of Indian politics now.
We'll take questions. We have floated slips. We'd like you to fill those slips and ask all the questions to us. However, if a slip is not there on your desk, or sorry, on your place, we'll have it circulated. We'll take it from the ushers further around, please. Thank you so much, sir. To request Mr. Sunil Parikh, Senior City Council member and Chairman Healthcare Committee to give his remarks.
In the meantime, just announce they can write questions.
Yes. So please write down your questions and pass it on to the ushers going around. We'll have it asked to Professor Lakshman. Thank you.
Okay, friends, I must admit that I think on behalf of all of us, I think it's been a very thought-provoking exercise. To say that campaigns don't matter in election campaign is almost blasphemy. And really, I think if 100 years of time has proved that you've been right, not only in the past but as well as in the present, we have to take you seriously.
So if we have 100 years of predictions, I may be dead, but I'll be very famous, right?
One interesting point that came to my mind was that you have given equal weightages to all your 13 keys. And I think this is something really unique. And while you were actually speaking, what I have tried to do is to apply it to two elections that are going to take place. One election is going to take place in Gujarat this year, and we have a national election next year. So without adjusting for country differences,
Right.
if I were to apply your criteria, then I have the results of our election in front of me.
But don't blame me if this is wrong.
I know, I think it takes a lot of courage for anybody to stick his neck out and stand up at the podium.
28 years.
Yeah, for 28 years and say that, this is what I believe, this is what will happen. And then, of course, I think if I were you, even I would not be able to resist saying, I told you so. I think it's an extraordinary achievement. The results of his application, his 13 keys to the Gujarat elections clearly show that there are 4 negatives, which means that if you require more than 5 for the current incumbent to actually exit. So the conclusion is that the Gujarat election, according to this American criteria, Mr. Modi will return.
As I said, don't blame me one way or the other. I don't want to hear any complaints,
I can see you have not put your email ID on your presentation. However, on the Indian front, if you actually apply this criteria, I added a tally of 7 false statements.
They're done.
So they are done.
Plus we have 2 years to go.
No, about a year and a half. But I think
2014.
in business, and it's really interesting. If you look at the criteria, it is so balanced. We normally feel that the poor actually dictate the elections in India. And therefore, whatever business says has relevance as far as the Minister of Industries is concerned or the Prime Minister is concerned. But when it comes to elections, it's the large population that is by and large not affected by industry or economic growth actually dictate the future of our elections and outcomes of our elections. So the Aam Aadmi is believed to actually make a big difference. And therefore, when from a FICCI standpoint, and I come here to you as a FICCI member, the elements that actually contribute to the 13 keys are only 2 elements, which is the short-term economy and the long-term economy, that is point number 5 and 6. So all the woes of the evil and the evil things that are happening in the economy now, the whole India shining campaign, the India story is now getting unraveled. I think everywhere people are finding business has slowed down, economy has slowed down, fiscal deficit is out of control, current account deficit has reached 4% of GDP this year. If you look at the rating, international rating, we are now as India at the lowest level of investable grade. And this is really a shocker for a country that is growing so fast otherwise. If you look at the number of problems that we have had sector by sector in industries and economy, they have increased. Interest rates have jumped up like anything. Fuel prices, including the latest last evening ones, the day before yesterday, has been quite steep. And if you look at inflation figures, for 3 years continuously, we have not been able to rein in. And to top it all, we have an exchange rate volatility which is devalued and depreciated 25% in the last 12 months. And we still have to compete with China, which has almost virtually a fixed exchange rate between the dollar and the yuan. So the terms of trade today for business and in industry are really very negative. The sentiment in industry is absolutely anti-incumbency. But the point that Alan is making is that all these hues and cries actually account for only point number 5. If you look at point number 6, which is long term, everybody believes in the India long term story. I think whether it's a particular